part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, everybody. What's up? Welcome to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Scott Sabol.
And I'm John Sabol.
So today we are going to talk with none other than legendary Cleveland Cavalier, in fact, Mr. Cleveland Cavalier, Austin Carr. John, this is going to be a fun one. It's the off season, after the draft, the draft just happened. We're kind of getting into that Cleveland Cavalier mode. It's hard to believe because it feels like the season just ended, but I can't think of a better way to start the summer season than to talk with Austin Carr.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that Cavs fans, old and young, know far too well. If they're old, like our dad's age, knew him from the 70s playing for the Cavs. And if you're young, in your 40s or in your teens, you know him just from broadcasting on Bally Sports as the TV color analyst. So, Austin Carr is a wealth of knowledge just about the game, but also about the history of the organization. And when he came there in the early 70s, right. I just want to know a lot about his background, when he got to Cleveland, how it was, the miracle of Richfield, playing at the old Cleveland Arena and all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah, the arena. Oh, yeah, we hear stories about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really intrigued, and then also would love to know what he thinks about this current Cavaliers team and the draft that just happened.
Yeah. You were talking about his background too. A lot of professional athletes, grew up playing sports that you might go, wait, you played that sport? I didn't know that. I'm curious to see if you played any other sports other than basketball growing up and see if you had a future, playing other sports. We always hear it, the professional athlete's a professional athlete, and usually they're multi-talented like that. So looking forward to talking about his history and like you said, then kind of pivoting back to what's going on here in the current time.
Yeah, Cavs draft wrapping up. Summer League starting here this summer, this month, I should say, coming into the early July out in Vegas. So Cavs will be tuning up here a little bit. They'll go on a big break this summer, and then preseason and camp later up in September. So without further ado, let's get into that interview with Mr. Cavalier, Austin Carr, coming up right after this timeout.
Hey everyone, this is Mike Voorhees.
And I'm Brian Shaw. No, not the pitcher. We're the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast, formerly a Swinging a Tribe.
Don't have time to watch 162 games of baseball? We do. We have you covered with recaps of the games, stats, and analysis throughout the MLB season.
Subscribe now to Guardians of the Land and Press Play Pods for all your Cleveland sports analysis.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Welcome back to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Our guest today is known as Mr. Cavalier, played 9 seasons with the Wine and Gold, has his number 34 retired, played way back in the 70s in those early years, but also in that miracle of Richfield. And of course, you see him on Bally Sports as the TV color analyst. Austin Carr. AC, thanks for coming on. How you doing today?
Oh, just fine. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited to have you on. We appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk Cavaliers basketball.
Oh yeah, I enjoy that.
Absolutely. AC, your career, spanned about 10 years, 71 to 81. And a lot of our younger listeners, and you played before I was born. And I know not to date you or date myself, But, I know growing up in the Cleveland area, watching Cavaliers games, my brother would take me to games at the old Coliseum. We grew up in Hudson, so we went we were big in the Price Doherty era.
Right.
But when I was younger, I'd always look up into the Raptors. And if it wasn't my brother or my dad, they'd say, that's Bobby Bingo Smith. That's Nate Thurman. That's Austin Carr.
Yeah.
I would always ask my dad about you, and he would tell me all about your career and everything.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a situation where I really I went to Notre Dame, which was a football school, and came to Cleveland, which was a football town. So
right.
I was kind of used to that type of reception, but I was happy to say that we made basketball a part of the society, and I was happy that we were able to do that.
Absolutely. So let's take us back. You grew up in Washington, D.C., is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how was it going from D.C.? You grow up there, and then you head to Notre Dame. That's a long period of time. How did you get started in basketball, and how did you get to Notre Dame? Kind of give us the Reader's Digest version and all that.
All right. Well, I didn't start playing basketball till about the fifth grade. Mm-hmm. I was playing mostly baseball. I wanted to be a baseball player. But it's funny. My parents, who were working class people, my father worked in the government. My mother was a nurse. They were always pushing education. So they tied all of my brothers and I had four brothers too. And we all had to have the grades before we could play. And that was one of my youngest brothers tested their theory. He couldn't play. So we all realized real quickly that what had to happen. But it was interesting growing up. Like I said, being a baseball guy, because really football was there, but it wasn't. I enjoyed it. I belonged to a neighborhood football team, and we would have fundraisers to get our uniforms. I mean, so it was I was a working man early in my life trying to uniforms. Yeah. But it was a good time. I mean, and when I went to high school, that's when I really started playing basketball as a love of my life. I went there to Archbishop Mackin, and the Christmas tournament of my freshman year, the young man was in front of me. He got injured, and so I had to fill in and never look back from there. I mean, I averaged about 15 points that whole season and the rest of that season, and that was about it. I never gave that spot back, and that's kind of how it all developed, because I wanted to play football and baseball, but my high school only had 260 students, so we couldn't have a football team because we didn't have enough students. So, in baseball, we had a nice baseball team, and which I wanted to play baseball. I got a double-A opportunity from the Washington Senators then. That's what they were then. But my father was education. He said, you can't play baseball, son. You got to go to school. So that's kind of how all that happened. And then my basketball, because I used to watch Dave Bean, Elgin Bell. I watched these guys on the playground, man, drooling at them, watching them play. John Thompson, the coach of Georgetown, he played. All those guys were guys that I kind of watched growing up, and it just was it just kind of, the playground game was, it was nothing like it is now, because now they invite you to the gym and you know who's going to be there. But when you're playing on the playground, you're playing against old men, young men, street guys. I mean, so you had to learn how to deal with all of that. And guys talking trash, guys that kind of make you a little bit shaky, because they're street people and they're talking trash. You got to, well, should I do this or should I not?
Mm-hmm.
But those are the type of things that I grew up in. That really seasoned me to play basketball as I was coming up.
What about baseball? You said you played baseball. What position did you play?
I was a catcher.
Wow. Okay.
Left-handed. I batted
pretty good arm.
Right, left-handed. I batted left-handed, and my whole I used to really get excited about being able to throw you out from my knees, you know, right there, right out of the. And I used to really work on that, and I batted about 325. So that's how I got the opportunity. I went to Notre Dame, and I was going to try to play baseball there, and then naturally being a catcher, I used to use a padding in the palm of my hand, but I didn't my freshman year, and I broke a bone in my hand. And the basketball people said, really, you didn't come here for that. No more baseball for you. And that was it. So my baseball career came to a screeching halt.
Did you have a favorite baseball player growing up?
Well, naturally, Willie Mays,
Mm-hmm.
Hank Aaron, all those guys were all coming along. Harmon Killebrew was a guy I liked. And naturally, if you get into the history of it, the Roger Maris and just the home run guys were always, back then, home runs were like, those were the guys that you wanted to hit. But then they had Rod Carew, who could hit singles all the time. And
right.
It was just a lot of good, solid baseball players, man, that were just fun to watch. And baseball had a different aura about it then. It was much more a game that everybody wanted to play, regardless of who you were. And now it just seems like they've lost some of the luster.
Well, if you think about it, AC, it really worked out for you in your favor, leaving baseball for basketball because of your career. But I mean, when I looked at some of your stats and accomplishments at Notre Dame, there's a couple things that jumped out at me that I had no idea about. Like, for instance, you hold the NCAA record for most points in a game?
Yes.
61 in 1970 against Ohio University.
Right.
Most field goals in a game, 25. Most field goal attempts in one game, 44.
44.
I mean, like, you watch the tournament every March, and you think that'd be a go-to for, the broadcast to mention, but I've never heard that stated before. It's just impressive.
That's what I don't understand either. I mean, especially with this day and age where everybody's all enthralled with records, and they never really talk about it that much. So I mean, average wise, I think back then it was for 3-game series or whatever, first round series. I mean, I averaged 49 or 50 points for one of those series, and I'm like, but they never talk about those kind of things. So I don't let it bother me anymore. I used to get upset, but it doesn't bother me anymore. It's in the past, and that's it. And sooner or later, they'll recognize it. But right now, everybody's all caught up in the present and what they have now.
I think another stat that's just so mind-boggling, you have a scoring average of 50 points a game in 7 NCAA playoff games. That could very well never be broken, AC. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, I mean, because we were a independent school, the tournament was something that we looked forward to, and that was something that I would always try to gear myself up and get ready for. And really, the problem we had, you always hear about you need 3 guys to make it work. We had 7 guys, but only myself and College Jones seemed to give us what we needed when we needed it, and it just was tough because really I didn't. My game was not set up for scoring those kind of points because in high school I wasn't coached that way. But when I got to college, I had to do it if we were going to be competitive or try to do it. And when I came along with Maravich, Murphy, Mount, Rick Mount, Bob Lanier, man, those guys could score at will. I mean, to tell you a little story, I was trying to catch Pete Maravich. It was his senior year, my junior year. He averaged, it was about, for a 6-game period, he averaged almost 50, 60, almost 60 a game, and just blew me away. I had to end up with the second second scoring in the country because he just went on a tear that was just unreal. But he was, and that's another thing. I don't mean to get off the subject here, but they don't talk about him. They don't talk about Kareem. You know, I mean, it's amazing how, as great as those players are, they don't talk about those guys in a reverent way. They don't even mention their names. And I'm like, wow, how can people be so devoid of the great history that those guys brought to the table?
And a lot of those points were scored, AC, and correct me if I'm wrong, without a three-point line.
Yeah, all of them were without three-point line because the three-point game was not even thought of back then.
My dad always talks about Pistol Pete, always talks about him. And he's one of the names that he always brings up, and just how good he was, and how the fact that, it's a name that, like you said, no one ever talks about it unless you saw him play, which is kind of a travesty.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, he was unbelievable. He almost like he was a magician. He'd make the ball disappear. I mean, he was that good. I mean, but again, people don't, and for a while there, they were getting back into nostalgia, but they've let it go now. So they don't really get into it like they used to. And just those players, man, I mean, they were just awesome. But, they don't talk about Oscar Robertson. Man, he was unreal. I mean, every night they were like that. Oscar told me one time, he said, AC, if I had known that they were going to make that big a deal out of 3-point, about a triple-double, he said, I'd have got one every night.
Jeez.
I said, okay, Oscar, all right. And really, for 2 seasons, he did it. He got it one season, and then the next season, he missed it by 1 assist a game, the second season. But he said, I could have done every night, but I was just trying to win games because stats didn't mean anything then.
You talk about baseball too, and baseball is like it's a sport that has so much history and it goes way back. It's almost like of the 3 big sports, baseball is the one that people talk about the history, and they compare players going back 50, 60, 70, whatever years.
Right.
And unfortunately, in the NBA, it seems like once you get pre-19, I'm making this up, mid 70s, early 80s, it's like it never happened.
You're right. Exactly. You're right. I mean, you're right. And that's one thing about baseball. It seems like they really hold on to their history, and people love to talk about it. I mean? So, and you're right, in NBA, they don't do that. I don't know why. Even in football, they don't do that a lot.
Yeah, good point.
Right.
So, AC, you eventually, were at Notre Dame, became the first overall draft pick, 71 Cavs take you. You had your early years with the Cavs. Scott and I love like really random, weird history about Cleveland sports, especially about like the sports venues. What was it like playing in the old Cleveland Arena in those early years?
Oh, man. That was quite a – it's gone now, so I can call it. It was a dump. I mean, that place was bad. I mean, when you could dribble down the floor, and the nails that they put in the floor would pop up because they wouldn't stay in the holes that they put them in. So you could be dribbling down and you hit the wrong 2x4 or whatever, and the nail would jump up. So it really was it was a tough. And the locker rooms were, oh man, locker rooms were bad. You could come in there. We come in on a practice morning, and you could hear the rats and the cats fighting each other for the garbage. Oh man, it was quite an experience. I mean, but that was home for us. So eventually we became a tough team to handle there, even though we still didn't win like I thought we should.
Terry Pluto, we had him on the podcast, and we asked him that same question. What was it like going there as a fan? and he was a kid at the time, probably about your age as a player, right? And he wrote in one of his books, Vintage Cavs, the story of Joe Tate and Bill Fitch going out in the alleyway behind the Cleveland Arena and shooting the rats with Bill Fitch's pistol.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just how bad it was. I mean, they were huge too. They looked like cats, but they were fighting, man. It was just. I had friends of mine who tell me, about 5 or 6 of them have told me this in the last 5, 6, 7 years, maybe 10 years, that they used to come down to the arena, climb up on the roof, and go through a vent at the top of the building and see the game that way. Come down and through the building, and that's how they would get in the game.
Wow.
Like Mission Impossible.
Right. I mean, unbelievable. But those were the days.
So you go from the Cleveland Arena to the brand new Richfield Coliseum just a handful of years later.
Right.
I mean, you're going from downtown Cleveland to basically a dump of a place at that point. But then you're going out in the middle of nowhere, but playing in this at the time state-of-the-art facility. How much? I mean, that must have been being on Mount Olympus.
Oh yeah, it was heaven. It was heaven. I mean, it really was. We just stood there and just sat in the locker room for about an hour, just enjoying it. I mean, it was just great. And the way the Coliseum was set up, the opposing team had to come down a ramp to get into the building. So all the fans would line up on that ramp, and they would just start hollering, "Let's go Cavs." And by the time the team would get into the building, man, that place would be rocking. I mean, it was unbelievable. That was one of the best times in my whole career, especially the Miracle year. And it was just a great arena to play in, and we learned how to use it as a home court advantage.
AC, I know you love talking about this because I've watched the broadcasts over the years when you guys have done anniversary moments, and especially a couple of years ago with the 50th anniversary of the Cavaliers' existence. Go back to that Miracle of Richfield. I mean, that 75-76 season was a special moment. You guys kind of came out of nowhere and upset the Bullets, and the place went nuts. Dick Snyder, the play, and just a magical moment, the first magical moment in Cleveland Cavaliers history.
Oh yeah, it was unbelievable, because really the year before we lost in the last game of the season for making the playoffs. We I think we lost by 2 points, and I forget who we lost to, but that knocked us out of the playoff contention. So the next year we came back, everybody was pumped up, ready to go, and we started the season out 6-11. And everybody was talking, what's wrong with the Cavs? What's wrong with the Cavs? Man, they can't get it together. And then we traded for Nate Thurman. And once we got Nate, everything changed. I mean, it was amazing. He just brought a confidence to our team that really propelled us into thinking that we could win a championship, which I really believe if Jim hadn't got hurt, we might have had a chance. We probably could have beat the Celtics, but him getting hurt and the way we were set up as a team, that really was tough for us to overcome. But that was like I said, that was the best team I ever played on, especially on the court and off the court. That's the best team I ever played on.
Go ahead, John.
AC, I was just going to ask you real quick as a follow-up there. Would you say in your entire career, no matter what you had accomplished prior and then thereafter, I know, your career ended about 5 years later, but when you look back on it and seeing a team like that kind of came out of nowhere, but you get a guy like Nate Thurman, and it's the first time you get a city to really kind of rally behind you. Right. I mean, that feeling is something that, my brother and I could never obviously imagine, not being professional athletes, but, it had to have been a special moment. But also, you saw it coming with Nate Thurman, but did you see or predict that the fans and everybody was going to come around like that and just really just get obsessed with you guys in that season? Because, from that moment on, like those early years, I should say, the Cleveland Arena, the Cavs weren't drawing, they were talking about moving to Toronto. you know?
Right. Exactly. Right. But it was an unbelievable experience because when we started winning, everybody in the grocery stores and the dry cleaners, everywhere you went, I mean, everybody was a Cavalier fan. It was amazing. I mean, it was almost like we were the first girlfriend and everybody's like all happy, you know? It was just amazing how everybody rallied behind us. I mean, they lived and died. Whenever you go to the store, if we lost, man, everybody would, oh man, the next time we're gonna get them. And I mean, it was just amazing how everybody in the city, football fans, baseball fans, everybody rallied behind because of the way we played. We played just like the Cavs play now. Share the ball, hustle up and down the floor, defending. I mean, it was just, it was quite a feeling and quite an experience all the way around.
Talk about Joe Tate. It's a name, you know, he passed away recently, and you know, when you know, all of us remember Joe because back in the day before you had the internet, you listened to the Cavs on the radio, and Joe Tate was synonymous with the Cleveland Cavaliers, like all the players from day one all the way up till the present time. But talk about Joe Tate, you know, did back then he looked very fondly on the Miracle of Richfield team and the teams in the 80s. Talk about Joe. I mean, back then, was there a relationship did he have a relationship with you guys, or was he a little more distant, kind of like how a lot of the broadcasters are now?
You know, he had a relationship with us, but he was not, Joe was not the kind of person that's going to embrace you. I mean, he's going to embrace you, but his way. And, but man, he was the best. I mean, I could listen to him call a game on the radio and turn the TV down. And that's just how good he was. And he was a great guy. No nonsense kind of person though. Mm-hmm. He didn't like BSing. He didn't like people like that. I mean, he would let you know that too. But he was a great guy. And man, he taught me a lot. I remember he told me one time, he said, AC, you can't get emotional like that because your name is no longer on the back of that jersey. He said, just call the game like you see it, and that's it. But you can't, after the game is over, you can't get emotionally wrapped up in it because you got another game coming up. So you can't do that because that's not part of your job. And ever since he told me that, then I kind of approached my whole situation a lot different.
Yeah, definitely hard for you, Mr. Cavalier, to not get emotional.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sometimes I get labeled as a homer, but hey, man, this is the team that I've spent my whole life with. So it's once in a while I think I'm allowed to be a homer.
What was it like when the Cavaliers retired your jersey?
Oh, well, that was quite a bit because it was during a game that we were playing. I was with Washington then, and we came in to play the Cavs, and they retired it. And then they really didn't let me know until I got here that they were going to do that. And you look at the way I looked at it is, you know, all the operations and knee problems I had and struggles and all the pain that I went through to play. I mean, it all was worth it when I got my number retired. I mean, I really. And like I told Coach Fish this, the only thing I regretted about my whole career is that I never, other than my first 3 years, I was never the same guy because I had those injuries. And I told him I wish that I could have stayed healthy so I could have been the player that he drafted. And, but you know, my father used to tell me, said, son, you can't worry about the spilt milk. You got to try to deal with what you have now. And that's kind of how I approached the whole thing. And once I got mentally comfortable with that, it really didn't bother me. And I really played some of my best ball those last 5 years, even though I was half the player. But I had learned so much about the game from all the veterans that I was able to be competitive the last 5 years.
AC, if you would have being a player now in the NBA and you had those knee injuries, in this day and age with the rehab and science and medical surgery?
Much different.
Your career would be completely different.
Oh yeah, much different. I would have played. I would have. First of all, I wouldn't have missed as many games as I missed, and I would have been able to recover quicker and much. I mean, you look at, because I basically went through what Klay Thompson went through, and look how he's done. I mean, I don't think I would have missed 2 years, but I mean, look how he's come back now to where, you know, he's not himself, but he's close. And that's a testament to, like you said, the technology now is so much different.
You know, this is a question I've always wanted to ask a former professional athlete. And I know my brothers met a bunch of pro athletes from golf through every sport you can think of. And I've met a handful too. And there's one characteristic that I've noticed with pretty much everybody, whether or not they've been retired a year, 10 years, 20 years, they still have this fire behind the personality, You meet them, and it's almost like if physically they could play, they would do it. Do you still have that fire? I mean, let's, stage aside, if you could go out and play, would you do it now?
You never do it. You never lose that. That I think that's a God-given gift that athletes, they just have the competitive nature. You don't lose it. I mean, I get juiced up during the semifinals and finals, and during the Cavs season, especially when we started playing well. I mean, with Rubio doing what he was doing, man, I was jacked up all the time. I wanted to get out there and play too, but I knew if I played half a quarter, it would take me 5 games before I could come back again.
So you take out your frustrations on the golf course, is that right?
Yes. Well, that's kind of where I've transferred my competitive nature to is the golf course. So I can handle that.
I've heard you're a good scratch golfer there.
No, not quite scratch. My handicap at one time was 2. Now I'm up to 8. So because I don't practice anymore like I used to, I don't have the time. So I just kind of deal with that. So I'm about an 8 now and trying to get better, but it's hard to when you don't get a chance to practice. So kind of how it is. But I enjoy the game so much that it feels good just to get out there and play.
All right, let's fast forward, AC, to 2003. We'll bypass the Price era days and go right to LeBron.
Oh,
You've known him since he was a kid, 18 years old. 16, 17 years old, probably. And he comes into the league, has since met those expectations, and then went even further. We've never seen a professional athlete in history do what he has done at the level in which, with the hype. I mean, we've seen Serena Williams do it and Tiger Woods, but the spotlight on LeBron was much brighter than for those others. So when you saw LeBron at 16, 17, 18 years old in his rookie year, you knew something was special. Did you ever think he was going to get at the precipice he is now?
No, but I knew he had a chance to, because I knew not only was he physically gifted, but he was cerebral about what he was doing. And he understood how all the pieces worked. And you could see at his young age how he would put people in certain positions. He would do certain things. I mean, he's a savant when it comes to the game. And it was really interesting. I called the only game he lost the high school game he lost. I called that game in the state finals that they lost to Pickering, one of those schools down there, and really it was a man. He kind of, like he used to do in high school. What he would do is let everybody play. He would get everything in order and let the guys do, and they would be able to win. But this particular night, the Bacon, I think it was Bacon, that they were on it. They wouldn't let the other guys do anything, and LeBron took over in that second half, and I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. But they still ended up losing by a point or 2. But LeBron took over, and it was like a man amongst boys, and that's how he came into the league, playing that same way. I mean, he just has a gift for understanding how to play with other people, and also play his game at the same time.
I think that makes him a lot different too than when everyone wants to compare him to Jordan. Jordan was a totally different player.
Yes.
Totally different player.
That's exactly right. I mean, Scott, you hit the nail on the head. And I don't know why people want to keep trying to do that. But he's a totally different player than LeBron. Jordan never had that many assists or rebounds that LeBron had. I mean, I don't understand why people want to compare those two together because they were totally different players.
Austin, do you think that's, it's unfair, but it's human and fan nature to compare the two because those are two of the greatest basketball players regarded mostly of all time.
Right.
And
Right.
I guess when the old argument come, well, who's the greatest of all time? I mean, it's hard to really give that answer because they were two different players.
Right.
But knowing that and knowing their skill set and their titles and all that, I got to ask you, who do you think is the greatest between those two? Or is it somebody else?
I don't think you can pick one guy because Bill Russell was one of the best ever. And he had 9 championship rings. Now, if we're going to go, because they like to throw that in there about Jordan with the 6 rings, Bill Russell had 9. And he had 2 more as a coach. But he had 9 as a player. And I'm going, well, wait a minute now. And his stats were great. I mean, he averaged 20-something points and 30 rebounds in a couple of his seasons. I'm going, well, wait a minute now. They don't want to talk about him. They forget all about that. I mean, it's just, you cannot compare the whole, and I just don't understand how people can just forget about the history like that when good as they played and good as they are, it's hard to pick one guy. I mean, because if you say Jordan, then I hit LeBron. And then when I say LeBron, then I'll hit Wilt Chamberlain. Then I'll hit Bill Russell. Then I'll hit Jerry West. Then I'll hit, I mean, so you start talking about guys. It's hard to put a handle on the best player ever. You'd have to go by positions and pick 3 guys out of each category, I think, to make it fair.
Let's kind of go a different direction here. Talk about your broadcast career. Did you think after you were done playing, 40 years ago that you'd go into broadcasting, or was there something that you always wanted to try? Did you look at that as being the future?
No, the Dallas Mavericks kind of settled that for me because I was the first player they took in the draft, and I was the last player they cut. Then they sent me to Washington, and I had just signed a 4-year deal there. So when I retired after my last injury, I still had 3 years left on my contract. So they wanted me to come down and do some games with Frank Gleber, who was one of the best at CBS then. And that's who I did a few games with Frank, and he taught me a lot about the game and about the announcing. And then I came back home and I started doing the Big Ten. I did Michigan, Indiana. I did those games for a while, and then when I came back because I went in private business for a while. When I finished that, I came back to the Cavs. I got an opportunity to do the game, and just like in high school, I just kept going.
The 2016 NBA Finals, we all know it happened. Cavs did the unthinkable. But for you, looking back at it now, extra special because of that moment you shared with Fred McLeod.
Right.
You've seen the video that Beth took, his Fred's wife, at the time, and posted on social media of you guys sharing the moment, the final seconds, and crying and just embracing it. And, we just had the anniversary of the title a few days ago, or on Father's Day, I should say, a few weeks ago. That's a video I'm sure that in your mind that you'll never forget.
Oh, no.
For our listeners and for us, for my brother and I to not really know Fred well like you did.
Right.
Talk a little bit about Fred and that moment and that team.
Oh, well, first of all, we shouldn't have been in the arena because the NBA does not allow local broadcast after the first round. So I don't know how they got us in there. Matter of fact, we were sitting next to the people from Belgium, China. We were sitting in a section where all the foreign countries were broadcasting the game back to their countries. And I don't know how we got in there, because right about a foot and a half over my head was an air-conditioned duct. And all I could hear was the whole game. But we broadcast the game back to the arena, and it was just quite, I mean, and really I was okay until I saw Fred break down and cried, and then I couldn't stop the tears. And it was unbelievable. I mean, what had happened, it was such a great ending to that game. And those people in that place, man, they were, I never heard such a quiet place. There was about 250 Cavs fans there that flew out for the game. And I couldn't believe, you couldn't hear him at first. But after JR came out and hit those 8 points in that beginning of the third quarter, all you could hear was, "Let's go Cavs, let's go Cavs." It was an experience I'll never forget. It was unbelievable. And Fred and I just in trying to get down to the floor through all those disgruntled fans was not quite, it wasn't too easy to do. So we had to almost fight our way back down to the floor, but it was quite an experience, man. And I really miss Fred.
So let's take us to right now, right? The 2021-2022 season's behind us. Right. You know, the Cavs have been kind of in a rebuild over the last several years, you know, and they're showing some life. I mean, last season showed a lot of promise. Where do you see this team going this season in the 2022-23 season? Where do you see them overall as a team? Break it down however you'd like.
Yeah, I think after coming out of the darkness that we were in, and really that's what usually happens after you have LeBron, because you spend all your assets trying to win now. But the best thing is that we have a future now because we have assets, and that's what's, to me, that's where I feel the happiest about our franchise, that we have assets that we can build on to make our team better. I think last year the team kind of surprised themselves, but they started to believe in themselves, and don't underestimate the value of Ricky Rubio. He was he's an individual that I had no idea that he had the type of camaraderie he had with his teammates. He had them all understand. He taught Garland so much, but the team rallied behind him so much, and he played like he was 25 again. I mean, it was unbelievable, and the team rallied behind him. And once we got into that momentum, it was hard to stop us. We were beating everybody by 15 points. It was amazing, and the game would be over pretty much at halftime, you know. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And when he went down, that's when I really thought, I mean, we hung in there as long as we could, but it was just tough not having Rubio bring that energy to the floor, and what the fans sensed that, and how he would bring. It was just a great experience. So I'm thinking the team's gonna have to find a way to, first of all, if you look at I always look at the last 8 teams that make the semifinals and get to the finals. They all have guys that can put the ball on the floor. They all have guys that can shoot it, and at least 7 or 8 of those guys, and they all play without the ball and with the ball. So that's what we have to become more of. And if we're gonna play those 3 7-foot guys, we got to have 2 guys out there that can facilitate. You know, I mean, because we wore Garland out, but see, what we had with Rubio was we could put him and Garland in the game together, or when one would go out, the other would come in, and we still kept that energy level because we had facilitated, somebody that could facilitate. So that's where we have to find a way to get that energy back to where if we don't have Garland in there, we still have somebody that can bring the energy level that we need to get everybody involved and get it up. And and keep because our defense is going to be there. Our defense is going to be there. It's just we have to get our offense to the point where we can depend on it every night.
And hopefully,
Mike Fratello. Oh, hold on, John, real quick. You remember we interviewed Mike Fratello? It was back last winter, and he was comparing this team to the teams that he coached back in the mid '90s. You know, very defense oriented, somewhat low scoring. Do you agree with that?
In a way, yes. I mean, they are like that. I mean, they're not a team. If you're going to score 110 and 15 points, 20 points, that really pushes us. But if we keep you around 100 points, then we were in all those games. And that's why I was so excited about the playoffs, because the playoffs, the game slows down. You don't see all those 120 point, 25, 20, 115, 110 is big in the playoffs. And with our setup we had, that would have been perfect for us. But we never did get an opportunity to get there. So that's why I'm kind of looking forward to see how we're going to come out this year. And because we still have some questions we have to answer, with Sexton, how we're going to handle that situation.
And let's stop this interview right here. This part of the interview was actually recorded just a few days before the Cavaliers traded Colin Sexton to the Utah Jazz for Donovan Mitchell and among other players and assets the Cavs sent to Utah. The next section of this podcast is an interview Scott and I did at Cavaliers Media Day on September 26th. And we caught up with Austin Carr again about his reaction to the trade and now his overall feeling of this Cavaliers team now with the acquisition of Donovan Mitchell. And that's where we will pick this up right here. Austin, a lot has changed since Scott and I spoke with you over the summer.
Mm-hmm. Right, sure has.
Yeah. Big trade. Did that surprise you?
Yes, because I thought he was headed to New York. I mean, he has relatives there. I mean, whatever I thought the Knicks would do, especially in the situation the Knicks have been in over the years, I thought they would do whatever they had to do to bring him in there, because that would change their whole fortunes. But I thank God that we got him, because he fits better with us than he does them.
No question. When you look back at that trade, obviously Cavs gave up quite a bit, but you're getting a guy who is a perennial All-Star, has had a playoff experience. I think he's played 39 playoff games. I mean, those guys don't grow on trees.
No, they don't. They don't, especially in this league now. Most teams gobble those people up. And but when you look at, as far as giving stuff up, we've already used a lot of our draft capital to get what we have now. And where Donovan's probably the oldest guy at 26 with, 3 years left on his deal. So I think this is what we started with when LeBron left. This is what we wanted to get to, and we're there now. So I think we can afford to give up a few of our assets to strengthen what we have now.
Coach mentioned that he's not going to put a ceiling on his team.
Right.
I mean, there's just so much potential. Where do you see this team ending up at the end of the season, assuming there's no injuries? I mean,
right. Well, that's the key.
I
mean, with no injuries, I'm looking at us to fight for the Eastern Conference. I mean, you look at it. Before Rubio went down, we were third in the Eastern Conference. I think we still have potential to get there again, especially now. And because a lot's going to depend on, again, we look good on paper, but you got to make it work on the court. And that's the key. And if you start out slow like we did, coming the year before the Miracle Year, and then the Miracle Year started out, we were 6-11, and the whole city was like, "What's wrong with the Cavs? What's wrong with the Cavs?" So you got to be able to handle expectations, and that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do from the beginning. You can already tell by listening to the coaches that everybody's trying to downplay the expectations, but you can't downplay it because it is what it is. I mean, everybody knows how we were last year. And the one important thing the coach talked about, I thought, was we didn't do anything. We really didn't do anything last year. So he can sell that to his players, and they should be ready to go at the beginning.
Right. You have nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. So just go for it. You got the talent out there. Now let's make it work.
AC, how important is it to have the chemistry build off the court already? Donovan Mitchell immediately joins the team, and voluntary workouts in Nashville. I mean, he's here in the community. He's at Browns games. He wants to go to Guardians games. He says he wants to explore the city. He loves the cold. This is a Cleveland guy.
Right. Well, the one thing for sure, coming from Utah, he's used to cold weather. So it's not like that's going to be anything different to him. But I just think that he fits in because his mindset is there. And he knows when he heard of the signing, the first thing he got happy about was the fact that we didn't have to give up anybody. That is what he was most happy with. And when I heard that, I said, oh, this guy, he's bought in already, and we're ready to roll. So it's going to be very interesting. We will probably have one of the strongest backcourts in the NBA, if not the strongest. And with our front court now, I mean, with the ability to protect the rim and all that, it's going to make us tough on both ends of the floor.
I know we don't like to give predictions, but I'm not going to hold you to it.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't surprise you if they go pretty deep in the playoffs.
Well, I'm looking at right now. I'm a progression guy because that's just how I was taught. I'm looking to make the playoffs. Then we'll see where we go from there.
Okay.
Because again, it's injuries. I mean, every sport. You look at football now. All of a sudden, guys are starting to go down. The key guys are going down. So what happens? The expectations drop. So if we can stay healthy, and we went through it last season, if we can stay healthy, pretty much healthy all the season, then we can capitalize on the talent that we have on our team. So that, to me, is the key as far as expectations. My expectation is to stay healthy.
Austin, it's great to hang out with you and talk with you, and looking forward to this Cavs season and get ready to go.
I'm looking forward to it, guys. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, I think he's as good as advertised, Scott. I mean, you could just hear the fire and passion in Austin Carr's voice, a guy who, loves the game, loves the team, loves the city, loves the fan base, but also a guy that knows so much about this organization because he has been with them for so long, almost 50 years.
It's crazy. And I didn't know he played baseball. I mean, that's kind of cool. And he was a catcher. And he practiced throwing guys out from his knees. I mean, you hear about that now with guys, but we're going back to when he was in high school doing that stuff. So that's kind of cool that he had the opportunity to maybe play some minor league baseball, but his parents said, you got to go to school. You got to go to a different route.
Yeah, get that education, son.
Right.
And we hear that all the time and time again, talking to some of these players.
Right.
You got to get that education, but sometimes it takes you away from one sport and then opens a door to another. And boy, did he have a career. How about those records in college, Scott? Like, it is never brought up during NCAA tournament about those records. I still can't believe it. And you can hear it in Austin's voice. He doesn't understand it either. It used to bother him, but now he's over it. But it's still incredible.
And it's kind of a shame too, that a lot of sports, they don't look at the history. They don't talk about what he scored 61 points in a game.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous. I mean, now nothing against players now, but 30 points is a big deal. 60,
right?
That's But you're right. I mean, after a while, you just kind of got to let it go, and and he's done that. What I find fascinating too is that nowadays, his golf game. I mean. His golf game. What did he say? He had a 2 handicap and now it's an 8. I think he could probably take us if we went out there and played with him.
Oh, I bet you he would. I mean, it would not be pretty at all.
No, wouldn't take much to take us anyway, but that's beside the point.
That's also true. He's just a guy, Scott, that, when you look back at the times of watching the Cavs during the LeBron era, even some of those lean years before he got there, and then the lean years after LeBron, and then now, I mean, he's pretty much been around since he retired in a way.
Right.
I mean, he was even around a little bit during those Cavs, those Bryce Doherty years too. I mean, he has seen it all. No wonder why he gets the nickname Mr. Cavalier. And you almost got to wonder too, you talk about the injury. We didn't really go that much into his injuries with his knee and everything that happened. I think year 4 or 5 of his career. And he was never the same. And you could look at his numbers. He's averaging 20, 22 points a game and he drops down to like 14 or 15 a game. You got to wonder if he would have been, first off, not hurt, or if that would have happened nowadays. I mean, you're talking about a guy who would be a perennial all-star and could have been among the all-time greats.
But you know what he also said too? He learned how to play differently. He learned how to play, not to get cliched, but maybe smarter. And he said, maybe I played my best basketball after the injury. In a weird way, for an athlete to actually, come to that conclusion, and for that to, how many years later, 40, 45 years later, to come to that to that piece, I guess, with where you were, and I don't know, some athletes, it takes them a while, but he seems to be at peace with all that, which is great. And he's enjoying life. Well, I want to thank Austin Carr for joining us here on our podcast. I know he's a busy man trying to enjoy the free time that he has because the season will be here before we know it. You can subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, Sabol Brothers on the Baseline. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, or if you're at work and you don't have either one of those two, you can just go to Press Play Podcast, and you can find it and just click it, put it on the window on your computer screen, put your headphones in, and you can kind of listen away. You can find us, by the way, on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Scott Sabol Fox 8.
You can follow the pod at Sabol Brothers, and you can follow me at John_Sabol. And if you are on Twitter, give us a follow, and we will be tweeting out, and we have been doing it now for the last year, links to the newest episode, as well as some teaser audio clips of some of our conversations with our guests.
Yeah, should be fun. Want to thank Austin Carr. And again, don't forget to subscribe. John, this has been fun, and looking forward to the next episode.